Good evening, everyone. Good. At this time, I would like to call the City Council meeting of January 6, 2020 to order. It is now 8:09 p.m. I would ask that everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to note that we have a quorum for the City Council meeting tonight. Are there any agenda additions or deletions?
Yes, sir. Councilman Gardner called and informed me that he could not be here and requested that the item regarding D under new business be postponed to another date.
And that's item E under the new business?
D, yes, health care for city council members.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to postpone that discussion to a later date.
Seconded.
It's been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, at this time, we'd like to call for citizen participation. Please, as you approach your mic, please give us your name and your address. I'd like to call Gary Allen.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Gary Allen.
Good evening.
I'm the chair of your Environmental Advisory Council. Pleased to see all of you this evening, and I want to publicly congratulate all of you and your newest members. Even though one of them is absent this evening, it's the first opportunity I've had as chairman of the group to recognize your service and election, and I want to congratulate you very much. On your agenda this evening, under new business is a resolution authorizing the celebration of the 50th anniversary of Earth Year in 2020 here in the city of Bowie. This resolution, which grew out of conversations among members of my committee and other members in the city, is a recognition on your part, which is why we've asked you to consider it, of the 50th anniversary of Earth Year in 2020. It seems, and I strongly recommend that you support that resolution when it comes before you later in your agenda. It seems that that's a very fitting start to a brand new year, much like my congratulations, because resolutions like this one, just like the resolutions that citizens make at this particular point in time each year with New Year's resolutions, seems a fitting time to reflect upon the future as we look ahead at your first full year as new council members and as governing leaders in our community. Because it calls to mind a reflection on the future. And we tell ourselves in this kind of a conversation that those of us who lived through the last year can do a bit better job in 2020 than we did last year by making these particular changes in our life. If we look forward and feel a little bit better about ourselves, if we act a little bit different than we did last year. There's an implicit acknowledgement that changing ourselves and our habits is possible, and that we are individually and as a group capable of making those kinds of things happen. Unfortunately, as many of you who read the paper probably note, over half of us will forego the fulfillment of these resolutions by the end of February. That's kind of the downside of this whole thing. You know, fighting for climate change is a lot like that. We've seen the headlines, and we have an idea of what things will look like if nothing changes. But if we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by just a little bit, at least through the end of February, by driving less, combining trips, carpooling, then improvements can happen. So what if we each made a resolution to include changing our own behavior and how we treat the planet as a part of our resolution, not just as a community, which will be before you later this evening, but as citizens sitting here this evening? What if we recognize that if we do just one small thing, things will change? And if we actually can embrace more than one thing, a great many things will happen. Now, the real question that comes up is, how can we actually make those things happen? Well, when we reflect upon the present and our impact on the future, it really looks at the personal decisions we're going to make about our lifestyle choices in the next few weeks and perhaps in the next few months and even beyond that in our life. It's a reflection of decisions we make about what we decide to do. It's interesting because while science can help in this, and sometimes that's humorously reflected upon, I'll just give a quote that I also read in the paper this weekend by Robert McFarland, one of the recent writers on the chroniclers of nature and climate change. He says, "We burn Carboniferous era fossil fuels to met Pleistocene era ice to determine Anthropocene future climate changes." So he's combining our understanding about how we classify the ages of the earth and looking at the impact of how we can understand that. You know, the interesting thing really, not just with these things, is that in my lifetime, standing here today, more than 95% of all the greenhouse gas emissions added by human beings to the atmosphere has occurred in my lifetime. As a matter of fact, for many of you sitting here this evening, since 1990, which I think most of you were still alive in that period of time or have been born since then, more than 50% of those greenhouse gas emissions have been added to our atmosphere. And we all know, and can't hardly avoid looking at the headlines of the paper, what the impact of those ongoing changes are on our planet. Now, we know if we don't do anything, some bad things are going to happen. Some bad things are already happening. We already recognize that the temperature's rising, the weather's getting worse, and if you read today's paper, Australia is burning. Those kinds of things can only be changed if each of us, including this community, make a small commitment to change our lifestyle in the coming year. Mr. Mayor, I commend this resolution to your attention, as I commend to each citizen the advent of including this idea in their commitments for the coming year. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Sue Lavera?
I'm going to give you something first. Ooh, present. More read. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. And first, a technical thing. I have been coming to council meetings for a long time, and half the time I can't understand what anybody's saying because they're not close enough to the microphone. So my wish for your resolution is that each of you will be mindful of that. I know I have a hearing issue. I know that Mark's got appliances back there to help, but we can all work together if we can hear each other. So what I have just handed out to the council and the mayor is a copy, and I'll show it to the folks here and then at home. This is a copy of the current Green Bowie newsletter. It comes out monthly. It is published by the city's sustainability planner, Ashley Armentrout. If you don't get it, I'm going to put her email right here. So you can subscribe to it. I truly do not know if you all on the council and Mr. Mayor, if you have had the opportunity to be subscribed to it, but if not, this is the paper, we won't do any more paper. This is your visual electronic to be copy. And what is the segue from Gary is that in here it describes some of the sustainable plans that are already in place in Bowie that all citizens can take avail of. And it also speaks to the work of the Environmental Advisory Committee and the Green Team, which I chair, that we are working borderline feverishly to do what we can, especially to educate our citizens. So citizens here and at home, if you don't subscribe, please do so by, and I'll turn this around so the others can see it. You can just email Ashley Armentrout and she will sign you up. And we look forward to questions and challenges, and a quote that I have is that we want to be enough to be effective without being annoying.
Thank you. Monica Roba.
Let's see. Okay. Good evening, Mayor Adams and City Council. Happy New Year and congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
I am Monica Roebuck and I'm located in Bel Air Town, which is off of Annapolis Road. And I'm a little early, but I just wanted to talk about a few budget items. I would like to have the council consider. I would like them to consider increased emergency services for the fire department located off of Annapolis Road. I'm located about half a mile from there, and that fire department is a totally volunteer fire department, and so they close normally around 5 p.m. even on weekends, and I would like to see additional services for the residents. We have approximately 50,000 or more people who live in Bowie, and because of the number of people that are continuing to come and move to Bowie, I think it would be a good idea for us to have additional services. I recently had a friend whose mother went into cardiac arrest, and she contacted the fire department, but they were not able to assist her. They directed her to the Northview location, and they were able to come, but in light of if they had an emergency and were not able to come, then it would have created even more of an emergency. So I would like to see either additional funding, longer hours, or personnel. And that's to the fire department off of Annapolis Road. I would also like to see increased funding for youth and teen programs. I live near Bowie High School, and I'm noticing a lot of loitering in and around Bowie High School, especially after school. I'm noticing a lot of littering, noise, and so I think if we can come up with programs that would keep our youth occupied and keep them busy in the time after school, I think that would eliminate a lot of issues like crime and other problems that may arise. And so for now, I think that's all. If you would kindly consider those two items for your upcoming budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Fiona Moody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm also speaking on the budget. I know this is not up for discussion, but as we enter into the budget working period, I wanted to just kind of start you off with this thought. I speak this evening obviously representing Bowie Citizens for Accountable Government. We're the largest citizens group in the city, and in 2019 our primary concern that we were hearing from our residents was no tax increases, pushing for a balanced and responsible budget with responsible spending levels, and no cuts to core services. One of the largest line items in our budget is our police department payroll and related benefit benefit packages. And so I know that that is going to be a problem as our city continues to grow in size and as we're looking to expand our police department. But it is really important that we are responsible with the increases that we're adding to our budget and keeping in mind that our residents are not made of dollars. I encourage our city council to work together and think creatively here. 63% of the jobs that have been created since 1990 have been low wage, and the average family in America can't afford to buy a home in 71% of the country. So it's really hurting people my age, particularly in this area, while we live in a more privileged portion of the nation. I know that our residents in Bowie really cannot afford any more tax increases, so keep that in mind, trim the fat where we're able to, because I know that there are places that we can make cuts and be just responsible with those cuts. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's all that we have for this evening. Are there any presentations this evening?
No, sir.
Okay. Let's move on to the city boards and committees.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for the appointment of Abigail Muscato to the Community Outreach Committee, please. Second.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, I move to appoint Mashia Desmond as our student member of our Education Committee.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second to add Ms. Richards to the Education Committee. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to move to appoint Renika Richards as our member of the Education Committee.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we add Ms. Desmond to the Education Committee. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Can we ask if any of the names called are present to please come forward? Okay. I would like to administer to you the oath of office. I state your name.
I, Abby Moscato,
Do swear or affirm
do swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and that I will be faithful
and that I will be faithful
and bear true allegiance
and bear true allegiance
to the state of Maryland
to the state of Maryland
and support
and support
the Constitution and laws thereof,
the Constitution and laws thereof,
and that I will,
and that I will,
to the best of my skill
to the best of my skill
and judgment,
and judgment,
diligently and faithfully,
diligently and faithfully,
without partiality or prejudice,
without partiality or prejudice,
execute the office of regular or alternate member
execute the office of regular or alternate member
of the, and state the committee,
of the Community Outreach Committee,
according to the Constitution
according to the Constitution
and the laws of this state.
and the laws of this state.
Hey, thank you so very much. One moment, please. Come get your certificate. Come on.
Congratulations, Abigail.
Hey, congratulations, and thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Used to be a singing person, by the way.
Congratulations. Go, ladies first. Go ahead. This is fun. Congratulations. Thank you. Congratulations again to you.
Mr. Richards?
Excuse me?
Do we get them wrong with?
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Hey, thank you. Again, thank you for your volunteer service to the city. All right. Are there any council announcements we need to make this evening? No announcements? Okay. Let's have the city manager's report at this time.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, I have one comment to make about as a report. As our city staff in total right now are all decisively engaged in the budget preparation for FY21, and we'll begin the review process late this month and all through February, and we will be consumed with that. But I just want everybody to know we're working hard to get ready to pass that budget. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, city manager. Okay, we move to the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second that?
It's been moved and properly second that we approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? If not, let's have the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Let's begin with any additional old business? All right, let's move on to the new business.
Well, Mr. Mayor, the Pecan Ridge Preliminary Plan number 4-19003 is up for consideration. Joe Minor, our planning director, will lead the way for us.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Joe Minor, the Director of Planning and Community Development. With us this evening is the Bowie Advisory Planning Board Chairman, Mr. Michael Bird, and he'll provide the report of their public hearing to you, and I'll follow up with the staff recommendation.
Good evening, Mr. Bird.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Happy New Year. So I am Michael Bird. I'm the Chairman of the Advisory Planning Board here for the City of Bowie. And on Tuesday, December 10th, we held a meeting to review the preliminary plan of subdivision, which proposes 80 single-family detached lots in a public benefit conservation subdivision. Subject property includes approximately 42 acres, is located at the end of Lloyd Station Road adjacent to the WB&A Trail in the Zone RR, Rural Residential. The meeting was conducted as follows. A presentation was held by Mr. Joe Minor, Planning Director for the City of Bowie, followed by a presentation by the Applicant's Counsel, Mr. Ed Gibbs, who's here this evening. After his presentation, and the board members, myself and the board members, had a number of questions that we had for the applicant. These included, but not limited to, what's the traffic impact upon the community and the ecosystem around Pecan Ridge, the proposed development? What's the rationale for pursuing the public benefit conservation area, which is a separate subcategory? What's the impact to local schools and/or the local ecosystem, specifically the local schools and their effect as far as crowding, overcrowding, or being inundated? After our questions were answered by the applicant, we then opened the meeting for public hearing. For testimony and presentations by various citizens, approximately 10 spoke. Again, their comments were included but not limited to the loss of green space, the need to implement traffic mitigation measures in and around the Pecan Ridge subdivision, as is, the project does not provide sufficient return as far as a public benefit to the city of Bowie. That was one opinion. Potential negative impact to local schools and school-aged children. It appears that the city/county or planning commission is invoking quantity over quality. And last but not least, the project as is now has not been annexed into the city. So what is the benefit of this proposal to the city and the citizens? I must say that one citizen was in approval of the proposed development, but their key point was that they would like for the developer and the development team to include citizen participation in the design moving forward as you go into the conception or the detailed site plan. So after that, I then closed the public portion of the hearing, and the board, we went to discussion and deliberation. And again, as I noted before, the property is not currently incorporated into the city of Bowie. The applicant has made an initial request to have the development annexed into the city, which was back in April of 2018, at which point it came before this body, and the body moved or recommended a motion to reassess the annexation dependent upon the outcome of the preliminary site plan. At this conclusion in the board, we held a vote in which 3-1 for approval, approval of the proposal of the preliminary site plan, with 2 caveats, which were obviously briefed by the staff, and those 2 conditions are that there shall be a trip cap of 60 morning peak trips and no more than 72 evening peak hours, or during peak hours for trips, subject to the application, and all off-site woodland conservation shall be planted within the same sub-watershed, and if practical, and as close to the city as possible. That concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions, anyone?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Minor.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to introduce the staff report on this item, Caruso Homes is the applicant. They're requesting the city's approval recommendation regarding a preliminary plan of subdivision containing 80 single-family detached lots on 42 acres in the RR zone located at the end of Old Laurel Bowie Road, which is now known as Lloyd Station Road, adjacent to the WB&A Trail. This plan that council has seen in the past as a request for annexation, as has been discussed by Chairman Byrd, is for approval of a conservation subdivision design which allows the clustering of lots to preserve natural features on the site. And that is, in fact, what the plan shows. This proposal, being a preliminary plan of subdivision, is reviewed against the master plan for the area. It's reviewed against the county's environmental regulations, such as stormwater management and woodland conservation, and it's also reviewed against the county's regulations for adequate public facilities. And we've covered all of these topics within the staff report in section 3 of the report, and we're recommending approval. The staff conditions in the report relate to trip cap, which is a way of limiting the amount of traffic that will come out of the development. It's essentially matching the peak hour trips that would be generated, so that would be a recommendation of staff that there be a condition of a trip cap of 60 morning peak hour trips and 72 p.m. peak hour trips. And the second condition in the staff report I'd like to amend and actually delete, because the applicant submitted a revised plan earlier this week that provides all of the woodland conservation on site. The initial plan that we reviewed showed some off-site woodland conservation, and so our proposed condition 2 was intended to deal with trying to get that mitigation within the same area, the same sub-watershed, as the subject property, but that condition 2 is no longer needed because the plan has actually achieved a balance of providing the 100% of the woodland conservation on the site. And so therefore, staff recommends approval with just one condition, as you see in the report. With us tonight is the applicant, Caruso Homes, and represented by their attorney, Mr. Ed Gibbs. And that would conclude the staff presentation, and I can turn it over to them.
Okay. Let's come forward.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Edward Gibbs. I'm an attorney with offices in Largo, and I am pleased to be here once again, certainly for the first time before you, Mr. Mayor, and some of the others, but I think probably this is our third appearance on this case before the mayor and council in one format or another. Again, I'm pleased to be able to represent Caruso Homes. Caruso is the contract purchaser of this particular piece of property, roughly 42 acres. Caruso has substantial experience in the development and construction of residential subdivisions. They were founded in 1986. They have been engaged in development and construction principally in Maryland, but also in Virginia and in North Carolina. They have 6 active subdivisions which are ongoing in Prince George's County today, and they're hoping that this will become a 7th. I'd like to introduce Mr. Andy Garrich immediately to my left in the front row. He is the development director with Caruso Homes, and he has supervisory control over this project. And then to his left, Mr. Phil Hughes of Rogers Consulting, our civil engineer, and I may call upon either or both of them to answer any questions that I'm not capable of answering. The property is zoned RR, and in the RR zoning classification, you're allowed to have a density of roughly 2 units per acre. And we have proposed what's called a public benefit conservation subdivision. And that's a particular technique to subdivide property under section 24-152 of the subdivision ordinance of Prince George's County. And basically, you can use this technique when you find a piece of property that has significant natural features, significant environmental features, significant view sheds, which should and everyone would desire to be preserved. So because primarily of the significance of the pecan grove and the pecan trees on this property, Caruso determined that it would be appropriate to pursue approval of a public benefit conservation subdivision. In return for doing that, you have to place 40% of the land area under conservation easements. That would mean they can't be developed for lotting patterns. And 60% of the land area is available for lots. In return for doing that, you're allowed to reduce the size of an individual lot from 20,000 square feet down to 6,500 square feet. But in no event can your theoretical density be exceeded. So at 20,000 square foot lots with 42 acres, that's roughly theoretical density, 84 lots. This development proposal would envision 80 single-family detached lots. And access would come in through a single roadway, would curve up, and there would be a series of 3 cul-de-sacs coming off of that major entrance road with single-family detached lots on either side of the roadways ending in cul-de-sacs. The interesting thing about a public benefit conservation subdivision is before you can actually file the preliminary subdivision plan, you have to file what's called a sketch plan. And that sketch plan is reviewed by staff at the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. It never goes to the planning board, but you go through a very rigorous review by staff where they gauge whether you have or can meet the requirements of Section 24-152 of the ordinance relative to the criteria for a public benefit conservation subdivision. And only after you get through that process can your sketch plan become certified by the planning director. So we went through that process. We came here actually before the mayor and council during that process and made a presentation. So once our sketch plan was certified, we were in a posture where we could file a preliminary subdivision plan, and that is what we have done. The application is in. It has gone through the subdivision review committee at the Park and Planning Commission. We received comments. There have probably been 2 major revisions to the plan that we have filed as a result, first of the subdivision review committee comments, and then after further review and comment by staff, there was yet another revised plan filed this past Monday. And the lotting pattern didn't change, but what the subdivision staff wanted us to do was, as Mr. Meinert said, put all the tree conservation on the property. But in addition to that, there were some fragmented parcels around the northern boundary of the property that will become a single conservation parcel. So staff wanted us to consolidate those as well. We have been to the Historic Preservation Commission at Prince George's County. They have recommended approval of the preliminary subdivision plan with 2 conditions, both of which we accepted. And we have worked diligently with staff at Park and Planning. We have submitted a traffic impact analysis, which has been reviewed both by, Park and Planning Transportation Division, Prince George's County Department of Permits, Inspections, and Enforcement, and by the Maryland State Highway Administration. We have received some minor comments. In general, it is our understanding that all of those review agencies agree with the conclusions of that traffic impact study, which are that we will not have an adverse impact on transportation links and roadways within our study area. And in that regard, we had to meet with the Transportation Division of the Park and Planning Commission to scope the boundaries of the traffic study. That resulted in a signed scoping agreement, which was dated May 1 of 2019. And they had 4 intersections in a defined study area that they wanted our traffic engineer to analyze. And they went out and did that. They took actual counts of the traffic going through those 4 intersections today, or when they did the counts. I think it was in May, before school was released. And they developed levels of service based upon existing situation. They then were given approved but unbuilt developments, 2 of them, that they had to develop traffic numbers for and assume that those trips were already on the road. And then they were required to consider a 1% growth in annual traffic for a period of 3 years and just add that to the road network as well. Then they had to develop the trips from these 80 homes and take all those extra trips, plug them into the 4 intersections, and come up with a level of service. And I think every intersection, the 2 signalized intersections, meaning 197 at Racetrack Road and 197 in Jericho Park Road, operate either at level of service A in both AM and PM, or I think in one instance it's level of service A in the AM, level of service B in the PM. Level of service D is acceptable. Level of service E is failing. The 2 other intersections are unsignalized, and the report will speak for itself, but they're at various levels. They have northbound, southbound, eastbound, and westbound approaches to them, and I think they operate at between level of service A and, in one instance, level of service D, and that's with total traffic added in. So the conclusion is that from a transportation impact, this subdivision passes all tests that are required to be assessed as part of the analysis of the plan. We have reviewed the city staff report, and we agree with the findings. We accept the condition of the trip cap, We attended the advisory planning board hearing and testified and made a presentation very similar to what I've just done before you this evening, and we appreciated the opportunity to appear there as well. I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have, and if anybody feels, Mr. Garrett, or do you feel like I've missed anything or anything you wanted to add? With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions or to stand down.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Gibbs, let me first say thank you for being here today.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We have citizens signed up to speak
do
on
we?
this item. If we could do that first before
Yeah,
we get
sure.
into the questions.
Oh, please.
I'll sit down. I'll be back.
Thank you. Okay, would you please come forward, Alyssa Greenman? And if I misspelled your, mispronunciated your name, please.
It's Eliza Greenman.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm here on behalf of the Northern Nut Growers Association, which is a 112-year-old organization founded by Thomas P. Littlepage, pretty much proprietor of the farm that is in question of Pecan Ridge. I want to talk to you today about the significance of this farm in terms of the horticultural legacy that is left and that still remains on the land today. So Thomas P. basically, first of all, the pecan in the ridge wouldn't even exist without Thomas P. Littlepage, because he introduced pecans to the mid-Atlantic, northern pecans, that is. There would not be any pecans without Thomas Littlepage whatsoever. And so that's just a starter. He was a poor kid in Indiana, so poor that he had to go through the forest in order to try and feed himself and his family, and he would gather pecans. From there, he started a pecan nursery. He planted it out, and once he was seen, he was a loquacious guy and active and had a real sense of wit about him, and he was brought to the east to work for a senator of Indiana, and that's how he ended up in Bowie. What he planted in Bowie and this pecan ridge today is what was in his orchard, in his nursery as a child. And those are the foundational trees for every northern pecan that there is today. From a genetic repository perspective, you can't be beat. This guy was a lunatic about pecans, and he was in the USDA often trying to get certain actions moved forward, and he was really trying to make pecans more of part of the American diet, and also part of more of our livestock diet. And so my colleagues and I have taken a look at aerial photography as well as neighboring properties to the proposed pecan ridge, and what we have found is the horticultural significance of this area cannot be expressed by me. It is beyond me. It's beyond all of us. And it contains almost all of the old cultivars that we know are in existence, many of which are extinct, we think. They're likely in this orchard. And it doesn't even just stop at the pecan grove that's labeled on this, that's labeled here. I have all sorts of archives for Thomas Littlepage showing that he had collected many of the black walnut species that are now thought to be extinct. And just by looking at neighboring properties, what we've seen are natural crosses with high-valued cultivars that he had collected with our native trees to bring about what could be sort of a second or a third generation of really interesting nut culture. Basically, Bowie, Maryland could end up with some really incredible nut cultivars moving on from here just by doing an assessment of the land around Little Page, a horticultural assessment. He is the patron saint of northern pecans. And so I just ask that everybody hold that sort of idea in your head when thinking about this area. It's not just the pecan grove, it's everything that's surrounding this that the wind can pollinate. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce Milam? Good evening.
My name is Bruce Milam, and I live at 8010 Lloyd Station Road, and I'm a 35-year resident of Bowie. I've been at this location for 17 years. I love my place. Of course, I would rather not develop the adjacent farm, but, you know, the major concern I have with the development is to do with the traffic. And of course, the best solution to fix this, and as proposed to a previous contractor that wanted to build near there, would be a traffic circle. That would allow a safe flow, no backups on the 197, and that would be the perfect way to have good flow out of here. I do disagree a little bit. In the traffic report, they say there'll be 3/4 of a car per household at Rush, and in this area, that's not valid. In this part of Bowie, you're talking about a $400,000 or $500,000 house. There'll be 2 wage earners there. In the current environment, their kids could be there too, adult kids. But you know, this is reality today, so it's going to be two cars at least a house. So we're going to have a traffic issue. The builder said he claims that it costs too much to put in a circle. So then, and they have another option. And if you look on the back of the page, the second page here, and that shows the existing roads. And I first want to say what works here. And what works is if you're coming from the top of the page down 11th Street or 564, to get in, you just turn right. That works fine. It's perfect to come from that direction. It's safe, big vehicles can come in. Unfortunately, the developer wants to block that off. And when you really have to do nothing there. And then going out, if you start inside a development to the left at the bottom of the page, you turn right on Normal School, where they show here is 11th Street. And then when you pull out the intersection, you can see to the right all the way down onto 197, and you can see to the left around the turn. So you can exit safely there. That works perfect, so we need to just leave that alone. Now the issue I have, and this is the problem with this area, is there's no safe way to turn into the development if you come from 197, which is down to the bottom right. To get into the development, if you take the first turn on Normal School, you can't see around the turn. And it's just an unsafe turn. And then if you add to that, if you have a construction vehicle, a truck, a school bus, you know, an RV or something that's large, a horse trailer, you can very easily get T-boned because even though the speed limit's 30 there, people come through here between 35 and 50 miles an hour in that turn. And there's been numerous accidents there. And so as in this picture I show, what I would propose is that they leave the existing entrance on Normal School. You have to do nothing. Leave the existence exit from Normal School, the existing entrance from 564, and then just add a safe entrance from the 197 direction across the gore, you can see where there's a stop sign just above the middle of the page. And the developer has some ideas, but he hasn't quite gotten it right yet. Now, I've lived here a long time. I've seen a lot of glass in the road. My wife's been in an accident there. My neighbors had a customer with a horse trailer that was hit there. This needs to be fixed if this is going to go forward. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Aviva Nueski?
Good effort. My name is Aviva Nebeski. I live at 8306 Lloyd Station Road. I know that the purpose of this meeting tonight is not to negotiate whether or not this development is built. That is not within the purview of the Bowie City Council. My understanding is that what you're going to do tonight is determine whether or not you want to annex this property into the city. I am desperately opposed to this development. I have not spoken to anybody who lives in the city of Bowie who supports this development. This is something that doesn't need to be in the city at this time. At some point, you can certainly decide to annex the development. Wait till it's built. I don't understand what the rush is to annex at this point. Once it's annexed, you're stuck. You can wait and see what happens with it. There are still so many concerns about this development that have not been addressed. Listening to the presentation really concerns me. I am listed as a person of interest with the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. I am completely unaware of 90% of what I heard tonight. I have not been informed of the traffic survey. I have not been informed of the storm management project. I have not been informed of the revisions. I don't know anything that's going on, and I can tell you that this is going to significantly impact my farm and my way of living. I have been trying to get information from Park and Planning, and they have been less than helpful. I have contacted Chairman Todd Turner's office for assistance. I have been shunted to legal counsel with Park and Planning. Mr. Goldsmith refuses to even speak to me. He sends me emails, he sends me links that don't give me information. I'm feeling pretty frustrated about what's going on. My husband and I have done a little bit of research. We understand that there are regulations about building next to regulated streams. There is a regulated stream at the foot of my property. The road that would take the cars into the Pecan Ridge development would be built right next to this regulated stream. I'm reading the regulation right now that says that there needs to be 50 to 60 feet between a regulated stream and a road. There is not that much room. There is not that much room from my property line to the regulated stream. Park and Planning doesn't seem to care about the fact that there's an endangered mollusk in the stream. Park and Planning doesn't seem to care about the fact that, as Eliza said, there is more than just the pecan grove at stake here. There are trees throughout Temptation Farm that have historic significance. Again, I understand that it's not your decision whether or not to build, but I, again, want to go on record as opposing this. There is the letter of the law, and there is the spirit of the law. There is the ability to do something, and there is doing something that makes sense. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. As far as I can tell, the only benefit this project has is to the developer and to the current owner of the property who's going to get paid for it. If the city annexes, you're going to get tax dollars, yes, but you're also going to get incredible headaches because you're going to have 80 new homes with people who want services. They're going to want their trash picked up. They're going to want their snow plowed. They're going to want their leaves collected. They're going to want emergency services. The only access to this property is through not the city. Not the city. As Bruce said, that intersection is dangerous. I find it hard to believe that, again, we're talking about maybe the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. Anybody who's ever made that left turn from Racetrack Road onto Normal School knows that they're taking their lives into their hands. I've almost been hit multiple times. I don't believe that if you put up 80 houses, you're going to end up with 3/4 of a car per house. We just don't have the bus system. I mean, how are these people going to get out? They're going to be at least 80 cars. So if it's 60 a.m. trips and 72 p.m. trips, does that mean that only 60 of the 80 households are working people going during rush hour? Just doesn't make sense to me. I think that there's a lot more research that needs to be done before this development is built. But again, I know that's not within your purview, and I just urge you, please don't give them the support by annexing into the city. Wait until all the answers are out there and then make a decision whether you want to be a part of this, because I think ultimately you don't want this in your city. Thank you.
Fiona Moody.
Hello again. Okay, so I spoke at the committee meeting a few weeks back, and I found actually the response really disappointing, to be honest. I understand that the staff report, to piggyback off of what Aviva was saying, they're following the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law and the purpose for which these standards were put in place is not being followed, and I can address that in my testimony here. Pecan Bridge, first of all, is a landlocked property with limited physical access, and should it be annexed into the city, there's issues in terms of upkeep of the road, what services are going to be provided by Caruso should it be annexed, snow, leaf collection, trash collection, et cetera. And the 11th Street intersection is extremely dangerous. I would really encourage, as you look at this development and other developments, that before you vote on any of these things, that you actually go and drive the roads and experience the traffic issues that the residents in those immediate areas deal with every day. I would also like to address the status of our schools in Prince George's County and specifically Bowie. During the advisory and planning board meeting for South Lake, the committee noted that there is not a need for an additional school in this area, as the county finds there is capacity in the local schools. This is simply not true. Anybody who knows Bowie knows that Bowie High School has an annex where all of the freshmen attend, does not have potable water, and that is a situation that we should be extremely ashamed of in 2020 in the city of Bowie. 6 of our Bowie schools in the last assessment period, Bowie High, Heather Hills, Highbridge, Rockledge, Whitehall Elementary Schools, and Samuel Ogle Middle School were all downgraded in quality, losing 1 star. Bowie High School, which is listed at 83% capacity, now this is with the use of the annex, which has not been updated in I don't know how many years, is only 37% of the students that attend that school are proficient in mathematics. Benjamin Tasker, only 30% of the students are proficient in math. Samuel Ogle and Rockledge Elementary, 25% of the students there know how to do math. In today's age, we are setting these kids up for absolute failure. In 2019, Prince George's County Public Schools are up by 4,000 students. So where are these kids going to go to school? The staff report that was filed by Mr. Minor noted that our schools are adequate. We're not outstanding, we're not brilliant, they are adequate, and our students deserve better than adequate. The quality of Prince George's County schools during this last assessment period went down, while our neighboring Anne Arundel County saw the largest improvement in the state of Maryland. That should be terrifying for a city that borders Anne Arundel County, because you're going to see the people who are upwardly mobile and able to moving to Anne Arundel County so that they can get cheaper taxes and better quality schools. Police and emergency services, I don't know if anybody caught the Washington Post article on December 26th, but they published an article regarding response times in Prince George's County. In 2 police districts in Prince George's County, the average response times for police officers was above the regulated 10 minutes. Our county council member, Todd Turner, was quoted as saying, "This is the first time that we know that the 2005 legislation being triggered, which potentially puts a moratorium on residential development." And he said that there are a number of policy options that we have to consider. Passing legislation to increase response times, adding and staffing a new police station, boosting overall officer recruitment in Prince George's County. And he said that he's also having council staff research why the law triggering penalties was passed, and police are recalculating average response times to ensure that these are not problematic. With respect to Councilman Turner, the law was passed to ensure the safety of current residents in Prince George's County, and it was to put developers making a profit beneath the needs and the safety of current residents. Even considering increasing the response time is negligent in the extreme. It was also noted in the article that calls for responses are going down, so the overall number of people calling into Prince George's County Police is going down, and the number of officers are increasing, yet response times are still getting longer, and that's with the increase of our own police station. With annexation into Bowie, Caruso, the contracted buyer, note that's a contracted buyer, gets to dub their new Pecan Ridge development as a new neighborhood in Bowie, undoubtedly increasing the price tag on each home. Additionally, annexation into Bowie will decrease the development's costs as they can potentially tap into Bowie city water, preventing the need for well and septic for each unit. And as you can see, Caruso here has everything to gain with this approval, and with annexation, and current Bowie residents only lose. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you please come back up? Councilman, you wanted to ask some questions? Start off?
Yeah, thank you. A point of clarification. Mr. Minor, can you please give some clarification to folks watching at home, folks here in the audience, and to this body as well, as to what exactly are we voting on today, for the record?
You are here to make a recommendation to the Prince George's County Planning Board regarding this preliminary plan of subdivision.
And Mr. Minor, for the record, can you talk about where they have been through the county process exactly, and to the letter of the law, where they are at currently in the process?
Well, Mr. Gibbs had provided some of the background when he presented initially. They've been through the county's review process, not only with the preliminary plan of subdivision, but prior to that, going through the conservation subdivision design review, which was a staff level review. So they've been through 2 review processes at the county. The preliminary plan review, which we're undergoing now, is the public review process. And I just would want to point out also that it was stated earlier that there might be a detailed site plan to follow this. That is not required in this zone. So this preliminary plan of subdivision, which is going to the County Planning Board on February 6th, is the only opportunity for the public to review the plan.
And one more question. Are they in the entitlement phase?
This approval of the preliminary plan, if it's obtained by from the county, would give the developer the entitlement to basically take the project to the bank, get the financing, and build the infrastructure for the project. So,
and can you provide clarification to the public as to what that means exactly?
I think what you're getting at, Councilman, is that the question about the criteria for approval of a preliminary plan and whether that is something that is sort of an objective or subjective exercise. And according to the way the subdivision regulations are written in Prince George's County, that if the requirements for subdivision approval, which I've identified in the staff report, things like adequate public facilities, conformance with the master plan, meeting the county's stormwater regulations and the woodland conservation, if all of those criteria are met, the developer is entitled to an approval from the planning board.
I just wanted to get that on the record for everybody. Mr. Gibbs, thank you again for being here. My only question is really about the trip caps, and Mr. Miller made a really good point about this being an expensive property where you're going to have multiple people living in the house, right? As much property in Bowie is exactly like that. Now you guys have a trip cap of 60 in the AM, 72 in the peak hours, but a 60 single family detached lot. So explain to me how can you meet this trip cap exactly?
Well, those numbers come right out of our transportation engineer's report that was filed. He actually developed those trip caps. That's not something that the city did. His analysis, when you prepare a traffic impact analysis, you look at a couple of different things. You in terms of trip generation, you look at there is the guidelines for the analysis of traffic impact of development proposals, which is a document that regulates development in Prince George's County. So any traffic impact analysis that you prepare has to follow the guidelines. Those guidelines give you information as to how you generate the number of trips. The other scientific document is the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual as well. So those two things are used to generate the number of trips that you will have in a peak hour. That does not mean that 3/4 of a car is going to come out of a house in the entire morning. There's a peak hour that is established, and then trip generation occurs during that peak hour. But you might have another car coming out in the earlier hour or in the hour after that. So when our transportation engineer prepared his transportation impact study on Exhibit 12, I think it's Exhibit 12 in his report, he had trip generation, and those numbers are in his trip generation figures. The city staff has taken those out and said that should be a condition. Park and Planning will make that the same condition. So that's, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I know enough to tell you that much.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else before I have my questions? Would you like to, Councilman Bitterford?
Good evening, and thanks for joining us this evening.
Good to be here again. Thank you.
I appreciate your time here with us. I have a few questions for you. First of all, something I just learned this evening about the concept of a regulated stream. Are you tuned into that, or and do you have any other information that you could share with us regarding?
I'd like to ask Mr. Hughes to come up and respond to that question because he's analyzing that, but we do not agree with the statement that was made.
Hi, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name's Phil Hughes. I work for Rogers Consulting. We are at 1101 Mercantile Lane in Upper Marlboro. We have been coordinating with the county on the MDE, Maryland Department of the Environment, and they have not raised any objections to the roadway or stated anything to that effect.
But that's not the same thing as there being an issue, right?
As of right now, there is no issue with the stream or what we're proposing as where the entry road is. There is currently a road there now that allows access to that site. And per coordination with DPI, MDE, we're elevating that road above the 100-year floodplain as required per county standards to allow access to the site.
So they're not, have they proactively said that they are aware of the stream and that the stream is a regulated stream and that it's okay the way the plan is, or have they just not said anything about it?
They have not said that it's a regulated stream, and we have coordinated with MDE. We do have to get MDE permits for floodplain impacts and any impacts to the stream, but currently we're not proposing any impacts to the stream. So we do still have to go through the MDE process and get permits from Wetlands and Waterways Division with Maryland Department of the Environment up in Baltimore, which is a state body.
And are you familiar or aware of the issue with this potential endangered mollusk?
We have done a NRI, and that has been looked at, and that issue has not come up, that there is a protected mollusk that I am aware of.
Okay. All right. And another question here. First of all, I commend the effort on the conservation of the trees. I'm not sure, however, if there's been as broad a discussion or a broader discussion about trees in the other areas beyond the grove. Has there been any discussion with anybody about those trees and preservation efforts and the significance horticulturally of those trees?
I'm not a specialist in that area, but we have gone through a rigorous process with the county in visiting the site. We've done tree studies. We've categorized every tree that's on the site and the condition of those trees, and then coordinated with the county on where those preservation areas are going to be based on those assessments. Each individual tree was cataloged and inventoried on the site, and its condition has been documented on the NRI.
Was that was that with the mindset that you would have to do some replacement for them elsewhere if you tore them down, or was that just because they were specific trees, walnuts or pecans or what have you?
Well, everybody was concerned about the pecan grove, so the effort was made to save that and see where those trees were at.
Okay. The next question I have is with regard to the traffic, specifically at Normal School Road, Lloyd Station, and the like. Was there any discussion or thought on resurrecting the idea of a traffic circle in that area?
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Milam had proposed the concept of a traffic circle to us. He actually had a drawing that we gave to our traffic engineer. Unfortunately, that drawing vastly underestimated the amount of land that would be required to install a traffic circle that would accommodate the traffic movements that he would like to have accommodated with a circle. We don't control all that land out there. There is a homeowner out there, Ms. Morgan, who owns all that land. We would also have to acquire that right-of-way from her. Our traffic engineer looked at this, and listen, myself and our transportation engineer, Mr. Garrett, met Mr. Milam on site to discuss the traffic impacts. We walked the roads. We agree with him that if you're proceeding up Racetrack Road, you shouldn't be allowed to take a left on Normal School Road through that little cut through there. And whatever happens, we would recommend that appropriate signage and perhaps some type of a bollard system that, you know, as you see the little plastic bollards that you see in roadways, would prevent left turns into Normal School Road from...
Please.
If I could continue.
Please.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me say, first and foremost, all right, these items are not required by the traffic impact analysis that was undertaken. These are road improvements that my client is proposing to make themselves in order to make the road network function better. And what we have discussed with Ms. Morgan is her property has much the shape of a triangle. And as it goes down to the point, we have discussed with her acquiring property from her so that we could widen the turning movement so that a truck pulling a horse trailer, because we know there are 2 horse farms down that road, Ms. Nebeski is the owner of one with her husband, can safely make those turning movements. We have a design for that turning movement. We simply need to talk with Ms. Morgan about the ability to acquire that land area from her. And those turning movements can be made safely on the design that he has prepared without the truck or the trailer swinging out into an oncoming lane. That's pretty much the best I can tell you right now.
Thank you. Let's see if there's anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I've got some questions on traffic.
Yes, ma'am.
And thanks for being here tonight and clearly explaining everything.
Sure.
So on the document that we have here, they're about, and including all the residents that spoke today, there are about like 15 residents that basically feel like the traffic conditions in this area are not up to speed. Now, I understand that you've stated that a lot of the improvements that your client is prepared to make were not required by the traffic assessment that you that was conducted. However, it still seems that a lot of the residents in this area feel that this is an unsafe area when it comes to traffic and the roads that are currently there. So based off of the feedback that you received from them, I don't know what date this was, it looks like at your public hearing and today, how have you taken that into consideration to really understand exactly what it is they're saying as it pertains to the traffic in that area, the roads, and the improvements that they want to see you make prior to any development going on in that area?
Well, I think I'd say two things. Number one, I would reiterate that our traffic engineer, myself and Mr. Garrett, met with Mr. Milam and one other property owner in the field. We walked the roads of concern. We agreed that making a left-hand turn onto Normal School Road from Racetrack Road as you're coming up is not a safe movement, because at that point where you want to make that left, you can't see traffic coming from the other direction on Racetrack Road. That's a situation that exists today. We don't think that that should continue to be allowed to occur in the future. So we're making a proposal to modify that. Now, I can only tell you, and I speak with the greatest respect for everyone who voiced their opinions during the hearing before the Advisory Planning Board. What drivers may have as a concept of a traffic problem and what is actually a traffic problem under the guidelines and under the capacity analysis of how an intersection operates during the peak hours. They test the peak hour in the morning and the peak hour in the afternoon when the most traffic is coming through the critical intersections that you have to study. And so, you know, a driver may say, well, I don't think that's safe. And the scientific data simply does not agree with that. And that's the feedback that we're getting from the various departments who analyzed the study.
But what I'm trying to understand is, I understand where you're coming from, I do.
Sure.
But I kind of disagree with what you're saying, because if a driver is saying that they feel like it's not safe and scientific evidence is showing you that it is, at the end of the day, you have to cater to the driver, because they're who's on the road, and that's who the road is being developed for. It's for the driver. So if the driver is saying that they're not safe, and these are the residents of that community in which you are looking to develop in, you kind of have to take their perspective into accountability moving forward. And I understand that you feel that you have, but it's clear that you really haven't. So what I'm trying to understand from you and from your client is, would you be willing to take a second look based off of what they're saying? They're saying that they don't feel safe on the roads and what you've proposed today. Would you be willing to take a second look at that to really meet them where they are? And then secondly, I'll follow that up with a second question, then I'll pass it on to the mayor, is Fiona asked a question earlier in the sense of, I think her question was, how do you get in? Fiona, was that correct? Was that your question? How do you get in? Say again? Your question earlier was, how do you get in, right? Yeah. And I'd like to know the answer. I'd like for that question to be answered. So those are the two things. Would you be willing to take a second look? And the second one is, please explain how you get in.
Sure. Listen, we've been in contact with Mr. Milam. When he expressed the desire to meet in the field, we said, sure, we'll meet you out there. We have not received a request to meet in the field from anyone else. If someone else would like to meet in the field with us, we're happy to do that.
I think you have a room full of people that.
Well, that's
So
fine. I'm just telling you, if someone would like to meet in the field, we're happy to do that. We don't have a problem with that whatsoever.
Okay, so does that mean that you'd be willing to take a second look at the roads and exactly what they're saying?
What we would do is we would be happy to meet them in the field, bring our transportation engineer out there, have him listen to their concerns and have him respond to them. And if that meant that he needed to do another look-see at how the intersections are functioning, I'm sure he'd be willing to do that.
Okay,
But just meeting out there does not guarantee that he will find another problem.
Right, but it also, but it kind of, I mean, I'm trying to work with you here, but it kind of sounds like the traffic, yeah, in a sense, it kind of sounds like, okay, the traffic assessment person will come with us. We'll listen to what they have to say. The traffic person will respond. If they don't feel like, based off of scientific evidence, that what they're saying is correct, then we're just kind of going to go with what he said, which leaves the residents still feeling uncomfortable, which really doesn't really move us forward in any way. So would you be willing, like I asked previously, it's a yes or no, I understand. Would you be willing to actually hear what they're saying and take that into accountability and take a second look at the road with your traffic person?
We'll be happy to listen to what they have to say and take a second look at it, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, and the second one, could you answer the second one? How do you get in?
Well, there is an existing roadway that actually provides access today. Our engineer has been in numerous meetings with representatives from the Department of Permits, Inspections, and Enforcement and the Department of Public Works and Transportation for Prince George's County. That will be their call as to what they deem to be acceptable under the Prince George's County Road Code. They have advised us that they will be willing to approve 2 11-foot travel lanes for a total of 22 feet of paving within a 50-foot right-of-way at that access point to come into the subdivision. Now, there has not been a final conclusion as to what will be in the balance of that 50 feet. But we do know that they have told us they are satisfied with 22 feet of paving, 2 11-foot travel lanes. They find that to be safe to serve an 80-lot subdivision.
Intersection in question. The intersection in question is my son's bus stop, which actually got moved. We discussed that, right? They moved the bus stop from, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I apologize.
Yes, please.
I mean, I'm just saying, I don't necessarily know that I understand that you, like, based off your explanation, I don't know that I still understood how you get in.
From the existing road that's there today. There's a road now that provides access into the property, and we will improve that, but
okay.
It's a 50-foot wide right-of-way at that point. There's 50 feet of right-of-way for a public road, and what DPI has said to my client's civil engineer is that they will accept, and actually they've related that to me as well,
okay.
They will accept 2 11-foot paved travel lanes for a total of 22 feet of paving within that 50-foot right-of-way. They are still analyzing what other improvements they want within that 50-foot right-of-way to make up the balance for that road coming in terms of sidewalk on one side, raising the road level, and Mr. Hughes can respond to the details, the engineering details of this, but that is in general, that's how we're going to get in, is through the existing road with 2 11-foot paved travel lanes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I will try to make my comments brief and to the point. And that is, I think you see from the questions you received that as a council, there are still some lingering thoughts about where we are with the project. I know for myself, from just listening to the citizens and some of the questions, there are still some questions from a standpoint of environmental that I believe still need to be answered. I think there's still issues regarding safety that need to be clarified. I think very important to all of us, is from an education standpoint, though it's not necessarily on your plate. I really would like to be able to talk to school board with our council and find out how are we going to handle the addition of kids when our schools are overcrowded. Those are all issues that may not necessarily fall directly with you, but as a council, we need to make sure that we're doing what's best for our community. Having said that, again, there are some questions we still need to have answered. And I don't think we've gotten a good response and a feel that this is what we need to do at this moment. I think everyone is aware that there was no issue tonight about annexing the space today, but it is about whether or not we move forward. And I have concerns about questions that still need to be answered. And number one on my list is safety. Safety not only for our citizens, but safety for our kids and our education, and making sure that we can handle the additional growth. Now, I know it's not in the city itself at this time, but it still affects us. And so I think there's some questions we still need to work out, and I think we still need to address the citizens, particularly again, on environment, on how we're going to do traffic, and also we would like your thoughts as we talk with our school board and others about how we handle the education. And as we stand now, we know that we are at maximum capacity and over capacity at some of our schools. So, but I think those are the questions that we can address, that you can address.
I appreciate your comments, Mr. Mayor.
I was actually going to make a comment. I wasn't going to. Thank you. Sorry.
Do you have any more questions of me?
No, not really.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate the
I
opportunity.
appreciate you being here this evening.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a comment tonight about this process in its entirety. You know, part of this election was about development and overdevelopment, and this was a historic election. And part of the problem I see here today is, once again, and let me preface this by saying I do not believe all development is bad. I don't believe all developers are bad. I don't believe you guys are bad either. However, I think the process is flawed, both here on our city side, both here on the county side. Because once you guys leave us today, regardless of what we vote, you guys are able to go to the county and you'll be able to build. Now, on the annexation side, we have some control. But the reality is, they're going to leave here today, and something's going to happen. And so I implore everybody who's watching, everyone who's here, this is an important issue. Traffic, we're talking about people's lives here. This is an important issue, and we need everyone engaged in this process. This is what this election was about. This is about time. It's time for us to now come together and figure out in the city how we change our process, and on the county level, how we adequately advocate to the folks in charge to ensure that development is smart growth. It's not a talking point anymore. It's time to actually take action.
Alrighty. We've asked a lot of questions of the developer. Very candidly, I don't think we should take any more of the developer's time, and I'm happy to motion to recommend against the PPS tonight, if my colleagues are ready to do that.
Second. Who's second?
Second.
He seconded.
Probably moved in second. Discussion?
Does this council want to consider at all postponing this vote?
Mr. Mayor, I think you just need to declare the public hearing to be closed before you go to vote.
Okay.
What did she say?
She said the public hearing is closed.
Okay. At this point, we'll close the public hearing. Thank you. Okay.
Now is there a motion? Now is there a motion to vote?
Is there a motion?
Yes, I'd like to motion that we recommend against the preliminary plan of subdivision.
Second.
Moved and properly second. Discussion?
I reiterate my statement about if we want to move this so that the community has an opportunity to work with the development. Now, I defer to my two colleagues who have been working with this for a year and a half on if this is a feasible thing, that we see something productive coming out of it, and if it's not, then not. But I encourage us to postpone.
Postpone.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to postpone the vote.
You have to amend it.
Sorry, yeah. I'd like to amend the motion.
Keep it amended.
No, we have to either vote that down or up.
Okay.
Right.
We got to vote on that.
My very candid feeling is that we're going to take more of the developer's time and money. They're going to answer all these questions. We're going to come back and we're going to vote no on the PPS anyway. That's my read of the room. That's what I feel like is going to happen. I don't want to waste any more of their money and time. They can go straight to the county. I'm happy to just vote no tonight. I don't want to waste more of your money. Yeah, because this isn't going to result in a yes vote at any point, I don't think. So my motion remains.
And this is in your district, Councilman Stev, right? No, then right, correct. But it's the closest to your district in proximity, right? Then I defer to you on this issue.
Any other discussion? On readiness? Call for the vote? All in favor of the motion to
Reject the permanent plan subdivision? Yep. Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on. We're at the independent auditor's report.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, they're coming forward right now.
That was, think about it, that was brutal. How you doing? Okay, are we? City Manager, are we ready to get going? All right, let's move forward, gentlemen, ladies. Excuse me. Would you hold it down, please? Thank you. Go right ahead.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Greg Busting. I'm a principal.
Put the mic up a little higher.
Okay, and Byron's going to do something first.
Good evening, Mayor. Byron Matthews, Finance Director for the City of Bowie. This evening, Mayor and Council, as the code has indicated to us, the city must issue a comprehensive annual financial report annually for its year ending June 30th, 2019. Today, or this evening, we have a representative, Greg Bussink, from the city's auditor, from Clifton Larson Allen, LLP, and they will discuss the audit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that better? There it is. Okay. Okay, so my name is Greg Bustick. I'm a principal with Clifton Larson Allen. I'll call it CLA for now. We'll go with the rebranding. CLA is a little bit easier than Clifton Larson Allen. What I want to do tonight is review the results of our 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report audit. So I'll get started. So I'll talk about our approach, the results, and then I'll make some required communications that we need to make to the council as you are governance for the city. So our approach is a risk-based approach with emphasis on assessment of key internal controls. So we look at the more significant areas through our process. And part of our process, in addition to developing risk internally, we also talk to management, get their thoughts and opinions on risks. And then our communication process with management starts early in the process. We start planning the engagement. We'll probably start planning next year's audit, probably the next month or so. And then We speak often. We have frequent, regular formal status meetings. In addition, we have informal communications, emails, phone calls, things like that following up. Everyone got a copy of the comprehensive annual financial report, I think. It's 121 pages. Of that document, CLA provides 3 pages. So when you look at it, it's important to remember that the financial statements are the representation of management. Our job as auditors is to express opinions on the financial statements based on our audit. So I'm happy to say that our opinion on the financial statements this year is an unmodified or a clean opinion. It's the highest form of assurance that you can get on your financial statements. It's what you want. So congratulations to the city. Feather in the cap of the finance department. They do a lot of hard work to get this thing put together. As I mentioned, it's 121 pages of information that they summarize throughout the year and then report periodically. So congratulations on that. We also, as part of our audit, it's performed in accordance with government auditing standards, so we do issue a report on internal control and compliance with laws and regulations. We did have one finding that was related to the OPEB calculation. You may remember OPEB discussion last year. It was a new standard. What happened was they found an error in the calculation, and it was about it was less than 1% overall, but it was material. It was about $900,000. The liability that was recorded last year was $157 million. So overall, less than 1%. But it rose to the level that management wanted to restate the financial statements. And by definition, it results in a material weakness overall. So that's one finding that we did have in our report. Other matter letter, so what you may have heard before called a management letter. It's just a best practice that we recommend that the city continue to update their technology policies and procedures. They made some changes last year, and we just recommend that they continue to keep that up to date. So some required communications that we need to make to you as governance for the city. The financial statements of responsibility management, I mentioned that earlier. Our job is to perform an audit and issue opinions. There are certain qualitative aspects to the financial statements. So when you look at the financial statements, there are policies. And the notes to the financial statements, I always like to say, they tell the story behind the numbers. So it's important that you look at that, understand the policies and procedures, how the city records certain transactions. So that's included in Note 1. Preparation of financial statements. There are certain estimates. There are some soft numbers within the financial statements. Depreciation, the liabilities that are calculated by actuaries. So there are some soft numbers or some assumptions that are made there. We look at the assumptions for reasonableness, and I think that what we saw, they were reasonable overall. So we didn't have any questions or issues with that. None of the financial statement disclosures are really sensitive, nothing there that was confidential or that really was outside of the norm. No difficulties in dealing with management throughout the audit, no disagreements with management as far as we didn't get any pushback on accounting techniques that they were using or any procedures that we wanted to perform, so very helpful, and we want to thank them for their help. At the end of the engagement, we did have a representation letter that was signed by management. There were no issues with seeking out other accountants, asking for certain opinions on certain things. They would do something differently. Management didn't have any of those. There were no other findings other than the ones I've previously discussed. There was one uncorrected misstatement, which was kind of a roll forward from last year. Management actually did correct what we had the past adjustment on last year. We just need to take into account this year the impact of how it rolled through the financial statements. There were no corrected misstatements that we identified during the audit that we had management make. The one I mentioned earlier, management, when they talked with their actuaries, discovered the error and corrected it. And when you look at the financial statements, it's important to understand, as you look at the different sections, you look at the opinions, that our financial statements, our opinion does have different sections included within. So we don't issue, our opinion doesn't cover the entire financial statements. There are certain parts, introductory and statistical sections, those things that are considered supplementary or require supplementary information. And we look at that in relation to the financial statements, but we don't necessarily audit every number. And you'll see that in the statistical section. If you read our opinion, you'll see it's described there. And last thing, again, I just want to thank the city staff again for their assistance. We deal with folks from the utility department. We deal with folks involved with budget, accounting, finance. So we run the kind of the whole gamut of the city to get information as we work through our financial statement audit. And we just want to thank everyone again for their assistance. They help us through the process. It's a smooth process. It goes fairly quickly. And we think that the city's books and records are in pretty good shape, and we appreciate their help. And just, this is me, and then Eris Coleman is a director who works with me, who runs the day-to-day of the engagement. And at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions?
I appreciate your report. I appreciate your time tonight. Mr. Matthews, I always appreciate that your team continues to win a lot of awards for your wonderful work. Can you elaborate a little bit on the $900,000 error that was identified from last year's statement?
When the actuaries, so 2 years ago, the actuaries did a report to come up with an estimated liability for OPEB.
So this was about estimated liability?
Estimated liability, correct.
Because in your report, it states the one uncorrected misstatement related to prior year-end payroll accrual was identified.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's the uncorrected, sorry. That's related to, the city had a policy or practice before when they were recording accrued salaries, that they wouldn't record the accrual at the end of the year. And so the activity during the year was, they got pretty much a full year activity and they just missed the accrual at the end. This year they had elected to book that accrual.
Gotcha.
And there's just, so there's a front end piece that needed to be reversed. So there was a little bit more expense in the budget, in the financial statements than needed to be. There was a past adjustment that we discussed with management.
Okay, and the effects of that were immaterial, both individually and in the aggregate?
Correct.
Okay, cool. So, and go back to the other one then, the other issue that you were discussing.
I'm sorry. So for the OPEB calculation, there was an error related to one of the spousal benefits that were included.
Okay.
The actuary caught it, corrected it, and it rolled through the statements this year.
Gotcha. So that's all been solved.
Correct.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, and one more thing I did want to point out is that the city has received the GFOA Certificate of Excellence for 45 consecutive years, and they're applying for this year. So 45 is a pretty good rolling number, and I think the financial statements as presented have a pretty good chance of continuing that for 46.
46 years of good financial management. Thank you, Mr. Matthews, for your portion of that. And thank you so much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Any other questions, anyone?
Quick question for you. Thank you for being with us this evening. On the internal controls, were you focusing strictly on the financial aspects, or were you also looking at internal controls more broadly in a managerial standpoint?
We do. The city doesn't have enough money, so there's no requirement for a single audit, so we're not looking at a federal grant audit, but we do look at the overall structure. We look for incompatible duties, any sort of, where we think there's a weakness. We're looking for incompatible duties is the big one, so segregation of duties. We want to make sure that those are safe. We have some IT folks that look at the IT processes within the systems to make sure they're updated, patches are completed, those kind of things too.
All right. And through that process, there wasn't anything that manifested itself as an area of concern?
Correct, other than just the best practice to make sure that you continue to stay on top of the policies and procedures, that keep being updated. And that's, nowadays, it's a 28-hour-a-day job. You can't do it all in one day. You just have to keep doing it, do risk assessments, and keep rolling through. So,
all right. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any questions? I'd just like to ask, as you go through that process, do you continue, and you may have stated this here, to make sure that you're informing the city of best practices as you know it, as you go along?
We do. So some things may not make it to the formal communication, but when we sit down and we talk with management, there may be like sometimes a password configuration. Like best practice now is, and you probably have this every day, when you're trying to change your passwords now, you need special characters, numbers, and they have to be 14 to 16 characters long, whereas we may see something's 12. So we use NIST, which is National Institute of Science and Technology. That's kind of the gold standard, and we hold you guys to that, and we look at different things. So as we're working through some things they may say, like, you know, it might be better to do this. So overall, when we take those and put those together, that's where we came up with the best practice recommendation for the management letter.
And a quick question, are there other municipalities that you perform this service for?
Oh, yes. Pretty much, this is pretty much all I do is municipal audits. So CLA as a firm, we do, and I can't give you the exact, I'm just slipping me now, but it's over, I want to say 600 that we do within our practice area for state and local governments.
Oh, so we should be getting some good insights on best practices.
We trust me. It's what we do. We specialize in it. It's pretty much all I do all year long. So it's one after another after another. We kind of hold you guys up to each other. Sometimes people actually say, like, where are you getting these things from? And we're like, well, we're seeing it 5 other cities or 5 other counties are doing this, that we think is the best practice. And we talk it through. And we participate in GFOA, management participation in GFO. We have some trainings that we do. We have webcasts, things like that too. So this is definitely it's a big area for us. It's not a side job.
Hey, thank you so very much.
You're welcome. Yes, all right.
Any comments?
Thanks. You guys have a good night.
Thank you again.
Next on the agenda is the budget guidance for FY 2020 budget process is forthcoming, and Mr. Matthews will lead us through that.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. This evening we are gathered to discuss the budget policy guidance for FY21. And before I lead into that, I'd like to give a summary of where the city ended up as of June 30th, 2019. The general fund summary. The fund balance for the general fund increased by $803,236. As you know, when we begin in this budget year, we expected to use $6.8 million of the fund balance. The city did not use any of the fund balance as budgeted, but we did gain the $803,000. And that was done by actual expenditures coming in lower than anticipated and revenues coming in higher than projected.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to, we'll comment on that. What for those in television land, we planned to use $6 million to balance our budget. We didn't use any of it. As a matter of fact, you should add $800,000 to that, so we have a plus and as it relates to expenditures of over $7 million, which is another thing that doesn't happen very often either.
At the bottom of the graph, you can see our fund balance for FY219 increased to $40.3 million from $39.5 million the previous year. To look at it from the net change in the fund balance, you can see what we budgeted as far as revenues and what the actual revenues were. So we had an unfavorable budget variance. But if you come down to our expenditures, we actually budgeted $57.7 million, but we only used $51.4 million. So we had a favorable budget variance of $6.3 million. And that gave us the change in our fund balance of $803,000. Now, I will indicate that in that 51, $2 million of that were projects that were delayed and placed into the FY20 budget. The next graph shows us our general fund balance history. And as you can see, our fund balance for FY19 was $40 million. But we give a trend there. The top line shows the fund balance. The bottom line shows the percentage of expenditure. Our fund balance policy is that our fund balance would equal 25% of expenditures. The unassigned fund balance indicates, and it represents the residual fund balance that has not been assigned or obligated to any other projects. Beginning, ending 2018, we had 25.8 million. Ending 19, we had 26.9 million. So an increase in the fund balance of $1 million for unassigned. And that, meaning unassigned, that money is available for future projects. Our fund balance policy again, this shows how we lay that out as far as the 25%. Total fund balance is 40 million. Our general fund expenditures and transfers last year were 51.4 million. So we're at 78%, where our fund balance policy is 25%. The next slide would show the fund balance over the last 10 years. And as you can see, our fund balance, even during the recession periods, 2012 and 2013, our fund balance still increased in those years. The unassigned fund balance represents 52%, and you can see the years in which our unassigned fund balance is listed. So we ended up with that unassigned fund balance at about 26 million at the end of 2019. The next slide I'd like to show you deals with the health of the city, and it's dealing with the liquidity ratios. And what that means is assets to liabilities. So for our current assets, as we show 60.8 million, our current liabilities are 4 million, and the graph indicates that we have $14 to every $1 of current debt. The bottom relates to our total asset base, which is 157.9 million, and total liabilities 29 million. So in that case, we have $5 of the assets for every $1 of liability. The next slide shows our budget highlights. And as you can see, our final budget for FY19 and the related revenues are actual revenues, and that we did not use any of the fund balance. I show the next slide to give you an idea of those expenditures and where the savings were, basically in general government and public works were the main items. But you can see that we had savings all across the board for FY 2019. So tonight, what are our action items? Well, tonight we want to establish a framework for the FY 21 budget. We want to set priorities. We also want to emphasize the importance on using the CIP as a strategic financial planning tool. We like to consider the long-term recurring cost of any new capital project, and consider debt affordability as we determine what new projects are coming on board. We also want to consider increasing the property tax rate. The next category would be our debt margin. The city does not have a mandatory debt margin by the state or by city council, but best practices, the city has established 0.8% of our assessed value to determine what our debt limit should be. And as of FY 20, that includes the debt that we just issued for the ice rink. We're at 56.9% of our debt limit. The City of Bowie. These are the special tasks that we're here to do tonight. Council will meet and establish the budget priorities and guidelines. The city manager will convey the policies to department heads for guidance in preparation of budget request. The next slide shows our budget calendar. As you can see, the activities from December to January. Council will meet to establish the budget priorities in December. Staff will begin planning and making recommendations for its CIP program. In January, staff will also begin developing the goals for the upcoming year. In February, the city manager will meet with all the department heads and discuss all new costs and projects and set priorities. In March, the finance department will make revenue projections and prepare summaries and edits, and will assemble the proposed budget book for the city manager. In April, the city manager will submit the proposed budget and capital improvement book to City Council. I think that council meeting is going to be on April 13th, 2020, when we'll have our first budget hearing. So through the months of April and May, council will hold 4 budget hearings and 2 public hearings. And during the 3rd week in May, we will try to adopt the budget for FY21. Mayor and council, the next slide deals with the fiscal policies that are in place and things that we follow in order to ensure that the city's financial footing is stable. And as we deal with revenues and expenditures, we're looking to adopt a balanced budget. And that's where recurring expenditures do not exceed our recurring revenue. Also, we want to provide a 5-year projection for the water and sewer division, as well as the general fund. We'll establish water rates for the water and sewer fund to make that fund self-sufficient. The current rate is $12.55 per 1,000 gallons. We did not increase the rate in 2020. It remained unchanged from 2019. Another policy is that if we have any one-time recurring revenue, we will use that for capital projects only and not for any operating projects. Capital financing and debt management policies. The city would use long-term borrowing to finance, will not use long-term borrowing to finance current operations. The city will strive to maintain a high reliance on pay-as-you-go financing for all of its capital improvements. Mayor, as you know, the city built the gym as well as the senior center based on pay-go. It only issued debt for the city hall and the ice arena. We'll strive to have a high reliance on pay-as-you-go. That allows us to save for any capital expenditure that we're planning to make. In addition, we want to maintain that 25% for our fund balance. And if we exceed that 25% on our fund balance, we can use that money for capital projects in the future. And that's how we've been dwindling down the fund balance, by using it to promote our capital projects. And last but not least, I believe number 5 is looking at our capital project program and making sure that we analyze all new projects, looking at the acquisition costs, looking at construction costs, and the impact on future operations. The next one will be dealing with the capital financing and debt management policies. All debt issued will be paid within the period not to exceed the expected useful life of the improvements financed by the debt. And I talked earlier about our amount for our assessed value to determine what that bonded debt limit should be. And the other test that we have is a ratio of debt service to expenditures. We say that the debt service payment within a year should not exceed more than 10% of general fund revenue. Our next slide, Mayor and Council, is dealing with the revenue outlook for state, county, and the city. As we look at the state revenues for FY20, we are expecting personal income tax to grow by 1.3% and sales tax to increase by 2.9%. The city only receives the personal income tax portion of that. We're looking at some modest growth in FY21. We're definitely looking at a nice increase in income tax for FY21 at 4.2%. We still have a risk that housing and lower wages and uncertainty at the federal level could have an impact on us with our grant revenue that we're receiving from the Fed. The county outlook, it looks good. They're estimating that their housing recovery will increase by 3.5%. for FY20. Their intergovernmental revenues increased by 1.1% over FY19. There's still some uncertainty in the region and may have an adverse effect on the ending fiscal year. It's possible that we can have some cut in some state aid and some cost-sharing programs that will also impact negatively on county revenues. The city's outlook looks bright. In the FY 2019, taxable property assessments increased by 3.7% and are projected to increase by 3% in FY20. Highway user revenues for FY19 and FY20 were $1.9 million and $2.5 million respectively, compared to the $1.1 million we received in FY 2007. Mayor and Council, that money that we get from the state that's dealing with highway user revenue is specifically used to refurbish our roads and streets, and it's dedicated revenue source. And as you've heard, some economists are indicating that we may have a slowdown in the economy, but there are different opinions on that. But I think we need to recognize that there could be a slow in the economy, so we should be very cautious about our spending for FY21. The next slides will show you our revenues over the last 10 years. The next slide indicates our assessed value. And assessed value is the value of the properties in the city of Bowie. As you can tell, as we came out of the recession in 2012 and 2013, the assessed value of properties within the incorporated area of Bowie continues to grow. There was some comment about our assessed value declining, but that's untrue. income tax revenue over the last 10 years. That has been strong. We have some peaks and valleys in 17 and 18, and mostly that was just due to accounting accrual adjustments made by the state. We got more money in 17, and some of that should have been smoothed over to 18, but due to the accounting that the state employed during 17, we received a lot of that revenue in 17. Revenue from speed camera infractions. This is, though we're losing revenue, it's quite an improvement. It indicates that people are slowing down. And that's the whole purpose of the red light cameras. People are slowing down, thus revenue is declining. Our major sources of revenue in the city are state shared revenue. State shared revenue includes income tax, highway user revenue. It also includes state police protection and corporate finance tax. Then we have the property tax. Our property tax is about 58 to 59% of the city's revenue. And then we have all other. Now the property tax includes not only real, but it includes personal property as well. Again, the highway user revenue over the last 10 years. There was legislation passed last year to restate the calculation for highway user revenue. Over the last 4 years, we have been receiving a grant from the governor's office to supplant the money lost due to the use of the Transportation Trust Fund in order to balance the state's budget. But I think we are on course. We're still not seeing the type of revenue that we were getting in the early years, 2007, but I think we're on track to recover a bit there. The next slide will show our expenditures, and I've broken them out into major categories and just try to show the police department and all other departments. Transfers, that relates to the amount of money that we send to our capital projects and to our equipment acquisition fund. Equipment acquisition fund is used to replace all of our mobile equipment, trucks, vans, bulldozers, backhoes, and things of that nature. The next slide will show our total personnel, our full-time equivalents, and over the last 10 years, and we've had some modest growth there. The next slide will compare our tax rate to neighboring areas. As you can see, Bowie's tax rate is 40 cents per $100, and the personal property tax is $1. But your neighbors, you can actually see what their tax rates are. I think that's a good look for the city, and realizing that the city has not increased their taxes in 10 years, and that's kind of not normal or abnormal. But the city has done a good job in controlling its spending and keeping the tax rate constant by using some of the fund balance when necessary. Our budget projection plan increase shows a 3-cent increase in our tax rate for 2021 if approved by council. Our next slide is our unemployment rates in our neighboring areas. As you can see, Bowie's is 3.2% in October. That was the last complete month that we had information for. The next slide deals with our capital projects for FY20. These are our major projects that we are in the process of completing. As you know, the Bowie Heritage Trail was removed from our FY 2019 budget and replaced back in our budget in FY 20 due to requests from the citizens. Chesapeake Bay, most of that is stormwater management development that we need. And in Allen Pond, we're talking about phase 1 of the amphitheater, parking lot improvements, and the replacement of the synthetic turf field, which is completed now. I was over at Allen Pond for lunch this afternoon, saw a lot of people playing soccer on that field, so I guess it's ready to go. Capital projects for FY21 and beyond. These are projects that we've had programmed into our budget council, and these are the dollar amounts that we expect to spend on the various programs. Stormwater management to Allen Pond, water storage tanks, Public Works main facility, and improvements to the Kent Hill Center. Improvements to the Kent Hill Center is mostly air-conditioned HVAC replacement. Consideration for future projects would be the Milford development, South Lake, Carrington annexation, city facilities maintenance program, rebalancing the refuge and recycling services, and the indoor sports facility. I will take you from the general fund now, and we will go into the water and sewer fund and talk about that a little bit. The water and sewer fund is a self-sustaining fund. It is only financed by user charges. There's no commingling of funds from the general fund to the water and sewer fund. The water and sewer shares costs with the finance department, which they reimburse the general fund for. Major incidents with the water and sewer fund is basically dealing with the pipe replacement. That is our major project there. Our forecast indicates that for FY21, we plan to increase the rates by 5%. That could change based on how the budget projections come in, but that fund has to be a balanced fund. One of the considerations, though, Mayor, the consumption from the water plant continues to go down. People are conserving, people are buying new units that conserve water, people's activities have changed, so our consumption is constantly going down. We did have a little uptick in 2019, but as you can see, for FY20, we're going to be down again. Historically, these are the rates for the water and sewer operation. As you can see, the 19 and 20 rates are flat and unchanged. So we've gone from 2011 at about $7.33 per 1,000 gallons to $12.55 per 1,000 gallons. Major factors impacting the FY21 budget. Assessments values estimated to increase less than 5%, or approximately $1.4 million annually for several years. Property tax rate, no increase in the last 10 years, so expenditures continue to outpace our revenues, and there's a risk of potential federal cutbacks and lower wages would impact our income tax revenue. And the last is the phase-in of the replacement of the damaged cast iron water pipes. Council guidance for the budget. Are there any city-funded activities or services that could be eliminated or reduced in scope? Consider the impact of all future operating costs when adding new capital projects. And as I mentioned before, we have not increased the tax rate in 10 years. And are any additional services being requested by the community? Mayor and Council, the next slide will show the overall tax rate from 2013 to 2020. And as you can see, the city's tax rate has remained constant over those years. Your county rate is offset by the tax differential. Tax differential, what is that? The county basically gives the city a break in its taxes for those services that the city does on behalf of the county. The biggest part of that is our police department. So currently we're getting about you are receiving about 15 cents off the county tax rate due to those services that we provide to our citizens. The staff recommendations for next year will be to focus on essential core services, fund new projects with pay-as-you-go funding, avoid new projects based on disproportionate state and federal grants, defer all non-critical capital projects, and consider the long-term financial impact of current decisions. Review all of our user fees, which the finance department, along with community services and other departments, we carry that out annually to make sure that our user rates are adjusted to reflect the market. So in summary, the city's financial position remains strong. The unassigned fund balance is $26.8 million, 52% of expenditures and transfers out. Essential core services are being provided while maintaining a constant property tax rate that has not been increased in the last 10 years. Expenditures are slated to grow 5 to 10% in the upcoming year. Mayor and Council, that's the end of my presentation. I'm open to any questions that you may have, and I'll try to answer them.
Hey, thank you so very much. So look around. Any initial questions before I get started? Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Matthews, thank you for your presentation as always. Appreciate that it's thorough and understandable. So it sounds like in sum, we were looking to use $6 million in our fund balance that we ended up not needing, largely because things came in under as far as public works and intergovernmental expenses. I appreciated your breaking that down for us.
Sir, I'd like to expound on that a little bit. It's more than that.
You want to brag even more, Mr. Lott?
Well, I just want to make sure, I want to brag on my staff.
Just so the folks understand at home, we thought we were going to have to use $6 million out of our reserve fund. We didn't end up having to use that because Al Lott is wonderful.
No, my staff and the department directors have bought into our spending policies, and they don't waste city money. Now, we did not spend $2 million, but the other four, we'll take credit for that, sir. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate staff's diligent work with that. Mr. Matthews, state highway user revenue represents, it looks like, roughly $2 to $2.5 million worth of our income. Councilwoman DeBumadu and I attended a PGCMA meeting recently where we were politely reminded with large graphics that that money is expected to completely expire in the coming years. In our conversations late last year with state and federal lawmakers, we were told very pointedly not to expect that money to come back no matter what. With Kerwin Commission coming down the pike, I think it's fair to say that we probably are not going to really be able to expect that money to come back. So, I mean, my only comment is I think it's fair for us to consider a likely scenario that shared highway user money is not going to return after it finally expires, that's probably going to go away, especially as the state has other priorities. Not really a question, it's just more of a statement that I want my colleagues to know that at least I'm concerned about and thinking about. Councilman Dibomondu, do you happen to remember when those funds expired? Was that 2024?
I think it was 2024.
2024. Let's see. One of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about, is it true that other municipalities pay a lower rate to Maryland National Capital Park and Planning? Is that something you happen to know off the top of your head, Mr. Matthews?
I am not sure, but I would have assumed that there would be multiple rates. I know here in Prince George's County it's the same rate.
So every municipality?
It is possible.
Oh, it is possible?
Yes, I am not totally sure. I can only talk about Prince George's County.
Is that something you or a member of staff could look into and get back to us on? It's not urgent,
Okay.
but just a question. Came up last year and something that I promised folks I would inquire about.
Well, you know, there's only two counties involved with that. That's Montgomery County and Prince George's County.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. One of my biggest goals for next year is for us to really go through and identify those services that we are providing that, you know, there's some things we do that are for residents and residents only, trash and recycling. There are a lot of services we provide that, as we have begun auditing the use of those services, we've discovered are actually used, in many cases, by a majority of non-residents. One of my goals for next year is for us to take that approach that we did with recreation and apply it to pretty much all services we're offering, the senior center, all of our rec services, you know, I think we've audited most of those, and just get some specific numbers on who is using the facilities that our taxpayers are generously funding. Because if it turns out that we do have a lot of services where a lot of non-residents are using, then I think it's not unreasonable for us to look at ways to either make those services more or less financially difficult for our taxpayers, or to consider finding alternative people who might be able to provide those services so it doesn't happen at taxpayer expense. At least not our taxpayer expense uniquely. As far as the future county tax differential, can you talk to me a little bit, Mr. Matthews, about how that's determined, who determines that, and can we expect future growth in that tax differential as our police department expands?
The county basically runs the tax differential. It looks at what services the city provides that the county would ordinarily provide through its general fund. It actually affects the police department, it affects human resources, it affects aging, it affects code enforcers. So they go through all of those services that they would normally provide. What happens with the tax differential, we annually submit an application to the county. We show the county what services that the city is providing on an annual basis. We're rated based on what they believe they are contributing to us, and from there they give us a tax differential amount. That amount is then amortized over 3 years. So we don't see the full impact of the current rate until 3 years. But I see that increasing for us, as long as if the police department increases, I'm sure that the tax differential will increase.
Okay, so as our police department continues to grow, we can likely anticipate future benefit from that tax differential from the county?
Yes.
Okay.
Because that is the major portion of the tax differential for us.
Do you know off the top of your head roughly what portion that represents?
It's about 12 cents.
Oh, so that 12 cents out of 15?
Yes.
Oh, so that's the lion's share of that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, Chief Neske should be happy then. Great. Let's see, a couple more things. This is just getting it on the record. The $5 million worth of stormwater management projects that we're undertaking, George Stefanos isn't here tonight, but if he were, he would say, as he says, as nods to him all the time, that these are projects that we are basically required to take on as a part of, you know, complying with federal and state laws. So I just wanted to make sure that was on the record. It's not just that we love digging ditches in people's backyards. We're actually required to as a part of a larger effort that's a part of the regulations we're expected to live up to.
Yes, sir. Those projects are required by EPA.
Thank you. How do our water and sewer rates compare to WSSC's historically and currently? I think we saw some numbers either last year or 2 years ago. I haven't seen anything recently. If you don't have the answer off the top of your head, I'd just like to see those numbers. Because one of the issues that we have is that, you know, for years as a political choice, not a staff choice, but as a political choice, for many years we kept our water rates fairly low, to the point where we were generating enough money to cover needed expenses, but not really to save for the long-term inevitable projects that we are now facing. And I think residents need to understand that it's not just that we enjoy raising rates on them, that this is a limited system. We looked 4 years ago into the possibility of loaning money from the general fund to the water and sewer fund, decided that the rules that applied to that meant that we would have to charge a fairly high interest rate, so that was kind of shot down. But I mean, basically this boils down to we're having to make up for lost ground from decades of keeping rates artificially low and from the system aging. So if you happen to have those numbers, I'd appreciate it.
Councilman Esteve, I purposely took that slide out of my presentation because I think it's unfair to show WSSC rates compared to the City of Bowie rates. We are a small utility. We cannot grow the utility, so it's landlocked, so to speak. Our rates are going to be based on what it costs to run that facility. WSSC has the ability to spread any cost over a wider market than the city does. So our rates are a little higher than WSSC at this point. It's understandable. So comparing it to WSSC, I think it doesn't do anything for us, and I think it gives a wrong message to our citizens.
I hear where you're coming from. I know historically our rates were lower, and then recently we surpassed them a couple years ago as we've been making up for lost time. Do the WSSC rates in that, in those numbers you have, does that factor in all the additional fees that they charge? Because with WSSC, there's the rate, and then there's everything else you pay with them. Do you happen to know?
WSSC, similar to what we do, what I've been sharing with you tonight are the wastewater and water rates. It does not include our capitalization program. Okay. That's outside of the rates. So the overall cost of the water is higher than just the water rate and sewer rate.
Yeah, because I know WSSC tax on fees that are astronomical on top of what their rate is, so I just wanted to know if there was an apples-to-apples comparison available. That's something that we can figure out offline. We don't need to beat that one to death tonight, but I appreciate your answers. The only other two things are, I do want to encourage staff to continue to look to the state for assistance with various CIP projects. We all jointly signed a letter tonight asking Governor Hogan in his capacity on the Public Works Board to send us a cool $15 million if they have it for our water and sewer system. So any more asks we can make, and I know some of my colleagues are working on things as well, that would be wonderful. And obviously any savings that can be achieved on future capital improvement projects by collaborating with Maryland National Capital Park and Planning and outside partners would be greatly welcome. Let's make sure that when we have these capital improvement projects, especially if they're recreation related, that we include Maryland National Capital Park and Planning and any other potential friends, just to get options. That's all that I had tonight. I appreciate your time, Mr. Matthews.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Matthews. As always, it's great to dive into the numbers and see how well things have been going. So congratulations on the earlier review and discussion we had with the annual report, and also thanks for this information this evening. I have some questions and some comments for kind of future planning. I'm a bit of a Luddite here, so I've started with some of my comments on the computer, then I started scratching on a piece of paper, so if it's a little disjointed, I apologize. I should have stuck to one medium. The first comment is on slide 4. We have a dip in balance that's projected for 20 and 21. Can you speak to the key drivers of those declines in that estimate? That's for the general fund balance. Oh, no, slide 4, I'm sorry.
Right. Again, Councilman Wolfley, again, our expenditures are still growing at 5 to 7%. Our revenues are not growing as high in the general fund. So in order to balance our budget, we'll still be projecting using part of the fund balance to do so.
So that assumes that our tax base does not increase, is that what?
Well, it has the normal increase. We're probably expecting assessment increase of about 3.7% in this number. Also in FY 21, we're projecting in this graph a 3-cent increase in 21 to point 43 cents instead of 40 cents.
Okay.
But even with the increase in tax rate, we're still going to have a use of the fund balance.
Gotcha.
We're just not going to make that up.
All right, a question for you on the fund balances. I saw on page 37 of the bigger report the restricted and assigned and whatnot.
Right.
Don't even bother looking it all up.
Okay.
The question I have for you is, where does the pay-as-you-go money fit in terms of the fund balances? Are they categorized as restricted, assigned, or are they off of these books altogether?
They're included in the committed and assigned. The committed actually means that we have contracts outstanding. The other assigned means that there are POs outstanding. So those monies are basically committed.
Okay. So we've said that 25% of expenditures is our target.
Right.
What is our percentage of our fund that is assigned and committed? Because that would be a subset, or it should be below the 25%, right? We would not want to have the assigned and committed that would exceed the 25%, right?
Right. Well, I think you have to look at it in a different way. The total fund balance is 40 million.
Yeah.
So that's 78% of our program. The unassigned fund balance, which is the money available for you to spend on future programs, is 52%.
Mm-hmm.
So they would just be subsets of those other numbers, but we're looking at 6 million for the committed. That's another 6 million for the unassigned. Let me run a percentage of those numbers for you. It's about 2%, 2.6%.
All right, thank you.
For the unassigned and for the committed and assigned.
Excellent, thank you. The next question is, let's see if I can scooch forward here. That's just a comment. So you spoke earlier about on slide 13 about the debt, total debt, and we were at 56.9%, and you mentioned that included the ice arena. How does the Carrington debt fit into that calculation, or does it?
It's excluded because that's not debt on the city's books.
Okay, thank you. All right. No, got a couple more. Forgive me here as I go through. On slide 26, we had our, what was our low point on taxable assessed value? Was that back in 06 and 08?
I think the lower would have been maybe 12,
Okay,
2012.
all right. All right, okay, a couple comments then. I noted that we saw an increase in the balance on the water fund of about $1 million as a result of work. I think that principally was work that was not done on some of the pipes that we had planned. So I noted that that was the case. Is that true?
Councilman Wolfley, we did reduce the expenditure for FY20 by $1 million because we were not doing the pipe replacement this year. Thus, we did not increase the water and sewer rate for this year.
Okay.
So that was kind of our offset for that. We did use a bit of the fund balance to totally balance that out.
All right. Thank you. Question for you on, or actually this is now starting to get into the comments and guidance. One of the things for going forward, just piggybacking on what Councilman Estev said, with regards to senior center and other amenities that outside sources are using, I think we ought to start taking a look at increasing fees or starting to use charge fees as a way of reducing demand for those services for non-residents, because the last thing I want to do is to take on the burden of expanding my senior center because I have too many people who are coming in to use it who are non-taxpayers. So if we can either dissuade some use as opposed to completely blocking people out, that might be an option as well. I don't think the revenue will be much, but it's more about managing demand. We've spoken about tax rates. We've spoken about taxes being flat. I know that I've had a couple of communiques from residents who have expressed concerns that their taxes are going up. And it's not because our rate is going up, but it's because the assessed value is going up. Yep. And people are, in fact, going to end up paying more this year and next, and I know that the cycles continue as the assessed values are going up. I think as we go forward with this budget cycle, we're going to need to commit to some extra communication about this issue, about the tax rate, and about the fact that we are actually getting increase in revenue. So I think there needs to be some improved communication about that, and we should plan for that as part of our process. The water and sewer, we spoke a little bit about that. There's been, I think, 2 years when we were looking at the water usage rates, that we had actually 2 years where the water usage has actually gone up. Can we check and see if there's anything that we can associate that with, whether they're weather patterns or whether it's replacement program for meters, or if there's anything else associated with that that is a bit more than just a blip or a trend? That would be appreciated. Because the last thing I want to do is increase rates on the water and sewer unnecessarily if we're actually going to see a turnaround in consumption. One of the things in terms of guidance, one of the things I've heard pretty consistently is people like their trash service. So consistent with our review, going into the year in terms of trying to find places where we can cut money. That's one of the core services that my constituents don't care to see reduced. So I'd like people to keep that in mind as we're going through the planning process for the next fiscal year. We got money from Allen Pond, for Allen Pond. I believe it may have been from Park and Planning.
That's correct.
And we were pursuing some additional funds on that. Do you know if any of that discussion took place, or if there's any hope for additional support there?
I'm not aware of that, Councilman Wolfley. I know that we receive $101,000 annually from Park and Planning for Allen Pond. I'll check with my colleague, Sally Hines, to find out if that has changed for next year.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Questions, anyone? Just a couple of quick ones I have for you. I think we've covered a lot. First, I think it's a great presentation. I do want to commend the city and the staff on that surplus that you were able to generate. I look at it as surplus, even though it just meant you didn't use the funds. But I think you did a good job of saving the city and being good stewards of our finances. So I want to thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of real quick questions for you, and that is the $2 million that you said was moved from projects from last year to the coming fiscal year. What were those two? What were those projects?
Part of it, Mayor, was the cost for the INET for the ice arena. The other was for the CCTV camera for the security of the city facilities. That's made up those two projects.
So that both of those are...
Right, we rolled those over into FY20.
Oh, and those are worked into what we expected?
Right.
That's part of the cost for this year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I know we can't time the markets, we don't know everything, but have we tried to quantify what might be the cost reductions we may see if we economically hit a slide? Have you tried to look at what the downside might be?
Could you restate that? I didn't hear you clearly.
In other words, we know that we're looking at very positive. I'm looking at the numbers here, but there have been some reports that we may potentially be looking at a recession of sorts. And I was just curious that as we're going through the budgets and doing those things, the worst case scenario, do you ever try to quantify what that might be and where we would be as a city, what we might need to do?
Yes, Mayor. Currently, however, even though we hear these things about the recession, we just recently got a report on the valuations of homes in Prince George's County, which seemed to do quite well under the last triennial assessment. So we're seeing a real uptick in the assessed value of properties. Now, as it relates to the cost of construction, we understand that Maryland has a somewhat of a vacuum as it relates to trained, skilled workers to do that type of construction work. And a lot of those guys are being imported from other states to do the work in Maryland. Thus, construction costs will tend to be a little higher in Maryland for the foreseeable future. And that was due to the recession.
One of the things that I wanted to mention in terms of looking at our revenues, the more immediate impact in terms of our revenues if there's a downturn in the economy would be in our state's shared revenues. Those would be our income taxes and the highway user funds, things directly coming from the state. Our real property taxes, which is the largest component of our revenue, is a lagging indicator. That takes time, which is with the numbers Mr. Matthews was presenting, why in 2012 you saw that was the low point in terms of the real estate property taxes, even though the impact of the recession had occurred a few years earlier. There is a triennial reassessment of our property taxes, so it tends to be just a few years behind in terms of when that largest impact happens.
Okay. I think as we move forward, there are just a couple of things, and I think we've talked about some already with my council members, but I think moving forward, I would like to make sure that we look at making sure that we put on our list of priorities or things we want to focus on a couple of things that are near and dear to all of us and to myself as well. And that's making sure we, number one, look at making the city more accessible. You know, we've started that process now, and I would like to see us eventually make Bowie the most accessible city, not only in the state of Maryland, but in the nation. And I think that's a goal for us to work forward to. The other thing is education. As you know, I don't believe that we should leave the education of our schools in the city just to the state or just to the county. I think as we look at our budget, we should look to make sure that we can improve our schools ourselves where we can, and increase that budget to make sure that we can do the things that we as a municipality can do to help our kids. So I would like to see us focusing down that way as well. Again, if no one else has any questions or comments, I do want to thank you again, because I think you did a great presentation, and I do believe that our city's finances have been in good hands, and we're moving forward. Yeah, one comment.
I just have one comment. I just want to say thank you to you, Byron, because I know looking at the city of Bowie's finances and looking at other municipal finances, we're doing pretty good as a city. So I just want to say thank you and just give that shout out so everyone is aware that we are doing really good as a city.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the council resolution concerning the historically black colleges and universities settlement.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to thank Mayor Pro Tem Boafo for working to draft this resolution, and I would like to move that the council adopt resolution R-8-20.
Second. It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to take a second to talk about this resolution. Thank you, Councilman and Steph, for your nice words here. Right now, we have the opportunity here in the city of Bowie to make a historic statement supporting our HBCU that's in our backyard. As many of you guys know, our HBCUs across our state are in a HBCU coalition lawsuit. And right now, we're in a unique time where the governor and the General Assembly will head back to session in Annapolis and will decide on a lot of educational opportunities, both for the counties across the state, but also for our HBCUs, and we should take that unique opportunity. And so today, I encourage all the members to vote for this resolution, as the city of Bowie will be the first municipality in the state, shortly followed by Baltimore City, to support HBCUs across the state of Maryland. So I think this is historic. It's an opportunity for us to take this very seriously, and I encourage you guys to vote for this resolution.
And I apologize for preempting my colleague. I will withdraw my motion to allow Mayor Pro Tem Boafo move it himself.
Mr. Mayor, I move to pass Resolution 820.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Any further discussion? If not, ready for the vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's been moved and it's now been adopted. I'm sorry, bear with me, everyone. Motion passes.
That's correct.
Yeah, we're good.
I'm good. Resolution R-9-2020, authorizing the celebration on the 50th anniversary of Earth Year 2020 in Bowie, Maryland.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to thank former Mayor Gary Allen for his remarks, for his tremendous work, Sue Lavera, the entire Green Team and EAC, many of whom are present here tonight. And I would like to move that we adopt R-9-20.
Second.
Discussion.
It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think right here we have an opportunity as the city of Bowie to take climate change very seriously. We're in a unique time in our country. We're in a unique time in our state. And what this resolution allows us to do is allows you as mayor, working with some of our activists in our community, to really go out and find some new members on this committee that will be sustainable for a year, to really take the opportunity to engage the business community, to engage our residents, and to set an example for how Bowie is taking climate change very seriously. So again, I encourage all members to vote for this resolution as well.
Everything he said.
Any further discussion on readiness? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adjournment and to move to closed session. Statutory authority to close session, State Government Article subsection 3-305B1, to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction. Any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals.
Seconded?
Moved and properly second. Call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. To closed session.